Hello and welcome to the first February edition of Let's Talk Criterion, your exclusive channel for all things Criterion. In this edition, we'll be looking at 310 to Yuma, the 1957 Western starring Glenn Ford, coming to the collection in 4K UHD.
There is a lonely train called the 310 to Yuma. The pounding of the wheels is more like a mournful sigh. There's a legend and there's a rumor when you take the 310 to Yuma.
Delmer Daves was an American screenwriter, film director and film producer. He worked in many different genres, but he was famous for his westerns, Broken Arrow, The Last Wagon, The Hanging Tree, and in the same year, A Summer Place. It was a big commercial success, and of course, 310 to Yuma. Now, he worked with many actors in the established studio system, stars like Humphrey Bogart, Gary Cooper, Glenn Ford, James Stewart, and Richard Widmark. Now, with 310 to Yuma, which was released in 1957, he based the screenplay on the short story which was written by Elmore Leonard. Now, the story concerns an impoverished rancher who takes on the risky job of escorting a notorious outlaw to justice. The film was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. The American Western of the 1950s was a vehicle for a new social consciousness. Films full of critique of the status quo and nonconformist characters exhibiting a surprising psychological complexity. These films often delved into politics and frequently explored burgeoning Cold War issues, siding with or against HUAC, exploring race relations, and illuminating class struggles. Delmer Daves' 310 to Yuma was no exception. The story of struggling rancher Dan Evans, played in the film by Van Heflin, and his transport of notorious criminal Ben Wade, played by Glenn Ford, to the 310 train bound for the federal prison in Yuma, is in many ways a classic story of growth and of finding strength one didn't know one had. But as we see when Ben's gang robs the Butterfield stage, Wade is a man who values the group over the individual, so much so that he murders one of his own men because the gang member's weakness threatened the group's stability. Now, the film itself opens with Ben Wade, that's Glenn Ford, and his gang robbing a stagecoach in the Arizona desert. And from there, they ride to Bisbee, where Wade is apprehended. Local rancher Dan Evans, that's Van Heflin, accepts much-needed compensation in exchange for sneaking Wade to a nearby town, where he will guard the prisoner until the 3:10 train arrives to take him to Yuma. Hopefully, before his gang arrives to retrieve him. Now, this film is outstanding in virtually every way. Acting, directing, photography, locations, and of course the dialogue itself, which plays out both real and sharp and carries Leonard's subtle, dry tone with it. Wade is hypocritically happy to preach to the superiority of the group while enjoying the individual perks of leadership. When Dan Evans and his two young boys witness the gang's robbery and murders, Dan does nothing, even giving up his own horses to the gang without too much of a complaint. Later on in town, however, after his wife has planted seeds of insecurity and made him feel weak, he helps capture Ben Wade, who has stayed behind to dally with the beautiful barmaid Emmy, played in the film by Felicia Farr. Cinematographer Charles Lawton Jr. takes advantage here of Arizona locations and a red camera filter to really give the film a dry, dusty, almost noir-like look. And how he was able to create such tension from two men sitting in a hotel room is quite masterful. The gorgeous black and white Western cinematography in the film is reminiscent of John Ford's earlier films, mainly due to the use of similar locations, although Ford always strove for a softer and more sentimental look in his films. Cinematographer Charles Lawton Jr.'s 310 to Yuma creates a harsh world here with steep angles and craggy trees and dust, catty-corner geometric shapes next to wide open spaces and long, deep shots. And it creates the visual tension and interest that the film requires, especially in the second half of the movie, where there's nothing left for anyone to do but just to talk and to wait. Now, director Delmer Daves is probably best known today for late 1950s and early 1960s melodrama, which often slid into full-on camp, although it was his late 40s noirs that actually put him on the Hollywood map. Themes of social responsibility and the more overt adult fare fitted well into late noir, and he retained those themes when he transitioned over to westerns. Daves could be clumsy, though, at times with the use of sexual metaphor, however, and the famous bridal suite scene in 310 to Yuma is sometimes seen as yet another example of his too obvious symbolism, a campy attempt at injecting homoeroticism where none was really needed in the first place. But there's more to the bridal suite scene than just that. It's the setting for Ben and Dan's psychological showdown in the film, the culmination of Ben's mind games and Dan's attempt to muster all his courage. Now, Dan on the surface seems to be in a typical 1950s subservient female role, sitting next to the window in his pretty wicker chair, with Ben promising to take care of him if he would only give him one more chance. Now, the role of woman in Daves' 310 to Yuma, however, is also complex. The traditionally submissive female roles in 1950s American cinema meant women were often cast as slightly nagging background characters who irritated men into doing what they wanted. But in 310 to Yuma, Daves subtly subverts that trope. Alice Evans, played by Leora Dana, mourns the fact that her boys saw their father being weak, leading Dan to begrudgingly prove his strength. And as he struggles to earn this reward, he gradually discovers an empathy for others, a caring for the common good, rather than a single-minded selfishness. His cohort Alex Potter, played in the film by Henry Jones, undergoes a similar transformation, and even Ben's brief romance with the barmaid Emmy gives him a glimpse of humanity and of life as part of society instead of being outside of it. But it's certainly Glenn Ford's efforts in the film here that impress the most. He plays the villain of the story, but just like the characters in nearly all of Leonard's novels, sometimes the bad guys aren't really so bad. And here Ford does an outstanding job of playing such a part. It's interesting, though, Wade and Evans are on opposite sides of the law, and they live entirely different lives. And you start to notice a mutual respect and perhaps even a bond forming between them. Now, not surprisingly, this 4K restoration and its 1:8:5:1 aspect ratio transfer looks terrific from start to finish. It's supervised by Grover Crisp at Sony Pictures, and this new 4K restoration of 310 to Yuma reveals a striking level of detail, clarity and texture. The image is clean and crisp, with strong black levels and a mild amount of depth during daytime outdoor sequences, of which there are many. There are no digital imperfections, including noise reduction, edge enhancement and banding, and rounding out the visual presentation perfectly. This is simply a flawless presentation of a great-looking classic, and fans will enjoy every minute of it. Now, the audio is also another highlight here. In addition to the uncompressed original mono mix, there's also a brand new DTS HD 5.1 master audio track. Now, this is a tasteful remix of the soundtrack that even the most staunch purist should enjoy, providing a wider sound field and occasional hints of background ambience. And overall, it's a toss-up between the two soundtracks based on your personal preference. Both audio tracks feature crisp dialogue and a perfectly suitable atmosphere that gets the job done. Now, there was a remake of the film, of course, and that starred Russell Crowe and Christian Bale. This version, of course, has a somewhat darker ending, and that released in 2007. and it was distributed via Lionsgate. Now, the original film already has had a DVD and a Blu-ray release in the Criterion collection, and here it gets its 4K upgrade. The film comes in 2 discs, of course, a 4K UHD disc with the 4K digital restoration with uncompressed mono soundtrack, with the film in Dolby Vision HDR, and a Blu-ray with the film and these special features. Interviews with author Elmore Leonard, an actor, Glenn Ford's son, and biographer Peter Ford, and a written essay by critic Kent Jones. And the cover art is by Gregory Manches. Sadly, there aren't many features on this disc. Based on the story by Elmore Leonard, 310 to Yuma is a thrilling, humane action movie directed by the supremely talented studio filmmaker Delmer Daves, with intense feeling and precision. The film has a running time of 92 minutes and is in a 1:8:5:1 aspect ratio, and it releases on Tuesday the 3rd of February in the US and on Monday the 9th of March in the UK as existing spine 557. Next time on Let's Talk Criterion, we'll be taking a look at the John Cassavetes film, A Woman Under the Influence. That's coming to the collection on Blu-ray. So until then, from me, as always, it's goodbye, and above all, good Criterion viewing.